Check out carmarshal.com. The link is in the description. They help support us.
I'm glad that they finally made charges against him. And I could just go from there. I just want justice for Damon.
And what is justice?
Not thinking about the repercussion. Yes, I do think so.
Michigan State Police trooper charged with murder over ATV death. Detroit Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy has charged a former Michigan State Police trooper with murder in connection with the death of a 15-year-old ATV driver, according to court records. Nearly 4 months after 15-year-old Damon Grimes died following a state police chase that ended when trooper Mark Bessiner allegedly stunned a youth with a taser, prosecutors are levying second-degree murder and 2 involuntary manslaughter charges against the trooper. The charges carry a punishment of up to life in prison. State police officials said Grimes did not obey an order to stop driving his ATV illegally in the street on the city's east side. Bessiner, a passenger in the squad car, used his taser on Grimes, who crashed into a parked flatbed and died from blunt force head trauma. State police suspended Bessiner because he allegedly deployed his stun gun from inside a moving vehicle, a violation of department policy. He later resigned. 2 other state troopers including Ethan Berger, who drove the police cruiser, according to police sources, and another who removed one of the taser wires from the crime scene also have been suspended. According to the state police, they would not be charged Wednesday, but an internal investigation would be held. On behalf of the Michigan State Police, I offer my sincerest apologies to the family of Damon Grimes, said Colonel Chris Kibiidua, director of the Michigan State Police, in a statement. Troopers are not trained to do what Bessiner did, and we condemn his actions. His conduct was criminal in nature and deserving of the charges today authorized by Prosecutor Kim Worthy. Neither my apology nor these criminal charges will bring Damon back, but I hope they provide some amount of solace to his family. Hours after Grimes' death, Detroit police and state police launched separate criminal investigations. 4 days after Grimes died, family attorney Jeffrey Fieger filed a $50 million lawsuit against Bessiner. Berger was also sued, and Liss was named in court documents related to the lawsuits. Worthy is holding a press conference Wednesday to discuss charges against multiple police officers in separate cases. One of those cases includes Officer Lonnie Wade, who was charged in connection with the beating of a customer at a Meijer store in Detroit in October. He was charged with assault with intent to do great bodily harm less than murder as well as felonious assault. Wade's struggle with the 23-year-old customer on October 8 was captured on video. The shaky 4:52 video of the incident uploaded to YouTube hours after it happened shows the officer hit the man in the face with his baton. Police Chief James Craig said at the time the officer, who was working at the Meijer store on 8 Mile as part of the department's secondary employment program, violated the agreement with the store by initiating an arrest. Fieger also has filed a lawsuit against Meijer seeking more than $25 million in damages against the store. Fieger said the customer's teeth were knocked out by the officer's baton. Also charged Wednesday, Officer Richard Billingsley was charged with assault with intent to do great bodily harm in connection with the May 31 assault of 2 men at a mobile gas station. According to a complaint filed by the 2 men DeMarco Kraft, a college student, and Michaela Jackson, a Detroit City bus driver, at about 1:30 a.m. that day, the pair went to a gas station on Harper to buy cigarettes and encountered 2 officers. Jackson went toward the store to buy cigarettes and walked past Billingsley, who grabbed him and threw him face first to the concrete, and the other officer joined the struggle, according to the men. However, Worthy announced Wednesday that she has decided not to charge 2 Detroit officers in the February 13 fatal shooting of Raynard Burton, 19. Burton had been spotted inside a stolen car on Detroit's west side that day. He had carjacked the vehicle 2 days earlier, according to police. According to Craig, at the time, one officer, who was assigned to the 10th Precinct Special Operations Unit, chased Burton on foot. They ran into the backyard of a vacant house at 4255 Webb, where Craig said Burton struggled with the cop. The officer fired one shot, striking Burton in the lower right torso, Craig said. The Detroit Coalition Against Police Brutality issued a statement Wednesday urging Worthy to do the right thing regarding the police incidents. Our citizens deserve no less than to be protected from Rouge officers, it read. The incidents continue to mount, and there seems to be no end in sight.
Most police officers are good, hardworking people and very honest people. However, in the cases we're going to talk about today, we have the anomaly of talking about 5 specific Detroit police officers. 4 Detroit police officers and 1 MSP officer. I am going to discuss the 5 cases that have been reported on that were investigated by my office's Public Integrity Unit, as well as the agencies that you see represented here today. All involve officers. Westner unnecessarily deployed his taser at Mr. Grimes without legal justification or excuse, as Mr. Grimes was traveling at least 35 to 40 miles per hour. Mr. Grimes was struck by the taser's prongs, causing him to crash into a parked truck, and he was later pronounced dead as a result of this crash. There are 3 alternate prongs of murder in the 2nd degree. The 3rd prong is creating a very high risk of death or great bodily harm, knowing that death or such harm would be the likely result of the actions. Today we are charging Trooper Mark Bessner with 1 count of murder in the 2nd degree that carries any term of years or up to life in prison. We are alleging that Trooper Bessner created a very high risk of death or great bodily harm, knowing that death or such harm was the likely result, by firing his taser from his moving police vehicle at Damon Grimes, who was also on a moving ATV. We're charging him in count 2 with 1 count of involuntary manslaughter, the theory of misdemeanor manslaughter that Michigan still has. It's also a 15-year felony on the theory that a death occurred when intent was injury. In our 3rd count that we're charging Trooper Bessner with today is another count of involuntary manslaughter, and this is what's known as gross negligence involuntary manslaughter, also a 15-year felony. I want to highlight, and I will say this several times during this conference, that these charges are allegations, and the defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. The people are declining to charge the driver of the MSP police car, Trooper Ethan Berger, and the responding supervisor, or one of the responding supervisors, Trooper MSP Sergeant Jacob Liss, due to insufficient evidence. Now, I want to just pause here for a moment, and I want to clear up some misinformation that's been repeatedly reported in the press about Sergeant Liss. It's been misreported that Sergeant Liss took evidence from the scene of the ATV crash and destroyed it. That's incorrect. He did not remove any evidence from the scene. He did not initially, however, preserve the taser wire that was given to him by a trooper at the scene, but he later recovered it and properly preserved it. Liss did properly download Bessner's taser unit in itself and preserve the data, which confirms that the taser was indeed deployed. So I wanted to just point that out. The 2nd case I'm going to discuss with you today is the alleged beating of Devonta Stewart. On August the 30th of 2017, he was walking through a dark area in the Martin Luther King homes in Detroit when police officer Edward Hicks of the Detroit Police Department yelled for him to stop, and Mr. Stewart took off running. Officer Hicks pursued Stewart, and at some point, Stewart stopped running and laid down on the ground on his stomach once he realized that he was being pursued by a police officer. It's alleged that Officer Hicks began punching Stewart in the face multiple times, flipping him over, and causing bleeding and some serious injury to Mr. Stewart. The investigation that followed showed that Mr. Stewart was not immediately taken for treatment for what turned out to be very serious injuries, as I indicated before, to his eyes and to his face. I should also note that it's further alleged that Officer Hicks tried to get Mr. Stewart to lie about how Mr. Stewart, obtained his injuries. Today we are charging Officer Hicks with the following charges. Count 1, one count of assault with intent to do great bodily harm less than murder, a 10-year felony. A 2nd count of aggravated assault, which is a 2-year high misdemeanor, and a 3rd count of obstruction of justice. And lastly, we charge him in count 4 of 1 count of misconduct in office. And as I said before, these charges are allegations, and the defendant is presumed innocent unless or until proven guilty. The third case that we want to announce about today is the assault of DeMarco Kraft and Michael Jackson. On May the 31st of 2017, it's alleged that Mr. Michael Jackson and his friend DeMarco Kraft stopped at a mobile gas station on Harper Street in the city of Detroit to buy cigarettes. Mr. Kraft got out of the car and walked into the gas station while Mr. Jackson stayed inside the car that they were in. Police officer Richard Billingsley and his partner were already in the mobile gas station. And at some point it's alleged that Mr. Kraft, who told investigators that Officer Billingsley has a long history of harassing him, puts up his middle finger to Officer Billingsley. Kraft leaves the store at that point because he doesn't want to get further involved and further harassed by this officer. Mr. Jackson then gets out of the car and enters the store to get cigarettes, and Kraft later records on his cell phone what happened with Officer Billingsley's subsequent assault on Mr. Jackson. Officer Billingsley allegedly begins to harass, assault, shove, and curse at Mr. Jackson. Mr. Jackson later allegedly swings wildly at Officer Billingsley, completely missing him. The investigation further showed that Officer Billingsley then pepper sprayed Mr. Jackson, who was no longer any threat to him, not that he ever was, because he was intoxicated. He was never threatening to the officer, the investigation shows. Officer Billingsley then further assaults Mr. Jackson by spinning him around, throwing him on the ground, knocking over several merchandise racks in the gas station, and repeatedly punches and kicks him. Most of this is recorded on Mr. Kraft's cell phone. Officer Billingsley then continued to harass Mr. Jackson and later allegedly tries to throw away Mr. Kraft's cell phone, which was later retrieved by another officer from a trash can that the officer had later arrived on the scene. Officer Billingsley is also alleged to have turned off his body camera at some point during this whole melee. As a result, today we are charging Officer Richard Billingsley with one count of assault with intent to do great bodily harm less than murder. This was on Mr. Jackson, and that, again, as I said before, that's a 10-year felony. Count 2, one count of aggravated assault, a 2-year high misdemeanor. The victim on that count is Mr. Jackson. Count 3 is one of obstruction of justice, and count 4 was a misdemeanor charge that we're charging of assault and battery on Mr. Kraft. Again, these charges are allegations, and the defendant is presumed innocent unless or until proven guilty. The fourth case that we want to address today is the beating of David Bivens. And on October the 10th of 2017, Detroit police officer Lonnie Wade was in uniform and working secondary employment at the Meyer store on 8 Mile Street in Detroit, in the 1300 block. Around 8:40 p.m., Officer Wade approaches Mr. Bivens, who is 23, of Detroit, and asks about the items in the bags in Mr. Bivens' shopping cart. Officer Wade was shortly shown a receipt for the items by Mr. Bivens' girlfriend, and Mr. Bivens and Officer Wade begin to get into a verbal exchange, and Officer Wade later attempts to arrest him for disorderly conduct only after hitting him, Mr. Bivens, with his baton. Mr. Bivens had questioned Officer Wade's authority to arrest him. Mr. Bivens did refuse to be arrested, but at no time, the evidence shows, did he make any physical threat or verbal opposition other than trying to pull himself backwards. Officer Wade began to hit Bivens repeatedly with his baton for an extended period of time, the investigation shows, including at least twice in the face and or head. At one point, one of the baton blows hits Mr. Bivens squarely in the mouth, breaking several of his teeth. Although Mr. Bivens had an elevated voice and was certainly using profanity, he never makes any kind of aggressive or threatening gestures toward Officer Wade. The investigation also shows that Mr. Bivens showed no aggressive behavior, and throughout the entire episode, Mr. Bivens is walking backwards while Officer Wade is trying to hold him. There are several videos of this extended incident, including the Meyer store video and a citizen-recorded video that was subsequently uploaded onto YouTube. As a result, we are charging Officer Lonnie Wade, 65 years old, with the following. One count of assault with intent to do great bodily harm less than murder, a 10-year felony. One count of felonious assault, which is also known as assault with a deadly weapon, a 4-year felony. In count 3, we are charging Officer Wade with one count of misconduct in office for allegedly assaulting Mr. Bivens during an invalid arrest. In our final count for Officer Wade, count 4, another count of misconduct in office for the improper deployment of a baton. Again, these charges are allegations, and the defendant is presumed innocent unless until proven guilty. Arrangements are being made for these 4 officers to turn themselves in for arrest and arraignment. Our final case that I want to discuss with you today is the shooting death of Raynard Burton. And on February the 13th of 2017, Detroit police officers Gerald Blanding and Michael Davis were on patrol in the 10th precinct in a marked patrol car. They were also in uniform, full uniform. They observed a speeding green Pontiac Bonneville and pursued it with the intent to initiate a traffic stop. This was going to happen at some point. The car sped away from the officers and later crashed. The sole occupant of the car bailed out of the car and ran. The subject at that time ignored the officer's commands to stop. Both officers then began a foot pursuit. Officer Davis lost sight of the subject and later saw his partner drive past him in their scout car. Officer Blanding heard his partner, Officer Davis, I should say, heard his partner via radio say that the subject was spotted on Webb and Otsego streets. Officer Davis then heard, who had gone toward that direction, then heard a single gunshot wound as he neared the intersection of Webb and Otsego streets in Detroit. Officer Davis later found Officer Blanding and the subject, who was later identified as Raynard Burton. Burton sustained a gunshot wound to his midsection and later died of that injury. Officer Davis told his partner at that time, Officer Davis at the time, that he, Blanding, had wrestled with Mr. Burton and that Mr. Burton had tried to grab for his gun as he was trying to holster it. Officer Blanding indicated to Officer Davis that he had fired a single shot, and he also indicated that Burton ran because he did not want to go to jail. He, Mr. Burton, did not want to go to jail. The later investigation of Officer Blanding's weapon confirmed that one shot had indeed been fired from his weapon, and later a fired cartridge casing that was found at the scene after the testing was done found that had also come from Officer Blanding's weapon. As I indicated before, Raynard Burton died as a result of this gunshot wound, and according to the medical examiner, he died from a close-range, single-shot gunshot wound to the right chest. An independent civilian witness indicated that an officer was yelling, "Get down, get down," and that witness also heard the officer talking into his radio, calling for help, and he also saw a second officer that came looking for his partner. There were no body cameras or surveillance cameras in the area. The scout car video was indeed operational, but the shooting did not take place near the scout car or the scout car video system. Subsequent investigation in this case showed that the green Pontiac Bonneville in question had been carjacked 2 days prior on February the 11th of 2017, and the carjacking victim later identified Mr. Burton, the deceased, from a photographic lineup as a person that had indeed carjacked him 2 days prior, or days prior. Officer Blanding's description of the events to his partners are corroborated by the following results of the investigation. The investigation and the radio transmissions that occurred during this event, that Burton led the officers on an in-car and foot chase, that the two, Mr. Burton and Officer Blanding, engaged in a struggle, at which time Burton grabbed for Blanding's weapon. Also further corroborated by the civilian witness's account of what he saw and heard that I laid out for you earlier, and also the results of the medical examiner's autopsy, the close nature and placement of the gunshot wound, and the fact that there was gunpowder stippling around the circumference of the wound consistent with a struggle at close range. As a result, there is insufficient evidence to charge Officer Blanding with any crime. Accordingly, that warrant request is being and has been denied. So those are the five cases that I wanted to talk to you about today. And again, let me emphasize that overwhelmingly the police officers that work in this county, in this city, for the city of Detroit and the Michigan State Police are generally and overwhelmingly great officers who do a good job and a dangerous job every day. But it is a disservice to all of them that work hard every day and work truthfully every day when we have officers such as we are charged today completely working in the field.
County, this is Sheriff of the County COPWATCH, and I wanted to explain what fair use is. You can use pieces of news articles. If you're doing it for news reporting, you have commentary, and you're doing it for education purposes. So that's what fair use is, as you can see right here. Another reason why I wanted to make this video is to let you know I have just joined with Patreon. A nice thing with Patreon, I make no money on YouTube. They took the money away years ago. And so this is another way to give, and it's a nice thing too, because you can give monthly. You can give $1, $5, $10, whatever. I do 4 to 5 hours a day on trying to wake the sheeple up on how corrupt it is and different ways that you can fight the corruption. So Patreon is a way that you can do it, and then of course the old way is still there. Donate to Sheriff County COPWATCH with PayPal or credit card. So keep that in mind. 4 to 5 hours a day. I make no money, but the corruption happened to me, and I'm sick of it. So I'm trying to wake people up. But my wife would love it if if we could get some help out there. There's 47,000 subscribers. Just think if each one of you subscribers just gave let's say actually yes, $1 a month. 47,000 subscribers gave $1 a month. That would be awesome. That's not going to happen. But anyways, that would be great if it did happen. But do the math in your head. Just think about it. Like I said, 4 to 5 hours a day. I get no money from YouTube. YouTube has gone nuts. You can't do anything anymore. They're taking the money away everywhere. So these are a couple different ways that you can still help out with all this time that I put in. And as you know, I'm in a special situation where, at least I can do it, 4 to 5 hours a day. We have a cleaning company during the day. That's what allows me to do this, and we're debt free. So this is my hobby. I don't go fishing and all that other crap. I try to save the world. So help me out to make the wife happy, man. In fact, if you guys did give $1 a day, and there was 47,000 of you, and you did it, and each of you gave $1, and that was every month, oh my God, yes, I could quit. I could start suing them. Another idea too that we have is, if I got, some funds, we could actually contact everyone that has been ticketed and or arrested and put in jail and start sending them postcards to let them know we're here, and to see if everything went all right, and if it didn't, find out their story. So we could even do more investigations and more lawsuits. Lawsuits take money. So just think about that. 47,000 of you so far right now. $1 a day. $1 a month on Patreon, or $5 a month Patreon, 10, 20, whatever. Just do the math in your head. Help out. This is a lot of work every single day. Thanks.